Russell and Brian, thank you. We'll go ahead and close item 21, and we'll open item 22. This is Commission Regulation 16-03, Amendment 1, 2017 Heritage Tag Organization, Vendor Selection, and Special Regulations. Management Analyst 3, Maureen Hollinger, for possible action. The Commission will consider selection of 2017 Heritage Tag vendors and organization recommendations, and will also consider language changes associated with the sealed bid process to potentially address any outstanding heritage tags not allocated to vendors. Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Maureen Hollinger for Nevada Department of Wildlife. In January 2016, the Commission approved CR 1603 for the 2017 heritage tags, the species, seasons, and quotas. Pursuant to the Commission Policy 10, the Department mailed vendor packets out to potential vendors for the 2017 heritage tags. The Department received 9 vendor proposals by the deadline of April 18th, and at the Heritage Committee meeting in May, the committee reviewed those proposals and has provided the recommendations that you see on page 1 of this amendment. In support of that, there's also a spreadsheet for you to use as a reference if you wanted to know what some historical data was for the vendors and what they've brought in for some values on those heritage tags. Additionally, one of the challenges that the Heritage Committee has faced in the past and again this year is finding vendors for the heritage turkey tags. This is due to the fact that most of the fundraising events occur after the opening of the turkey tag season. So in an effort to address this challenge, the Department is also presenting language changes to Section 3 of the Special Regulations on page 2. So on page 1 of the regulation is the table listing the heritage tags by species. The rightmost column of the table lists the vendor recommendations that the Heritage Committee is forwarding to you for consideration. And the heritage, and that's in the blue italics, okay? And then as a separate item, on page 2, section 3 of the special regulations, the Department is recommending changes to the sealed bid process. This section 6 of Commission Policy 10 provides direction for sealed bids if there are no acceptable vendors for the tag. The current language in the CR 1603 only addressed sealed bids if there was an issue of receiving payment from a vendor after the 30-day requirement. The amendment changes subsection 3 to include the process if the Commission opts to have the Department award a heritage tag by sealed bid, and maintains the ability for the sealed bid if there's difficulty in receiving payment by the deadline of a vendor. As you can see in the table, we have a heritage wild turkey tag that has no recommendation. So with that brief explanation of the regulation, I would ask the Commission to maybe consider this regulation in 2 parts, since there's 2 different items. Part 1 being the heritage vendors and the information you have there, and then part 2, the sealed bid process. And additionally, at the Heritage Committee meeting the other evening, the committee did opt to not support the sealed bid process as presented. And that is all I have for you today.
Okay, questions?
Comment?
Yep, Commissioner Valentine.
Thank you, Chairman Drew. Regarding the one turkey tag that's remaining, I was able to get a hold of Mr. Corey Lytle with the Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited, and they did determine that their banquet is going to be on the 18th of March this year, and he was receptive in taking that additional turkey tag for their banquet.
Okay. Commissioner Wallace, I don't know if you wanted to address any of your committee recommendations. At least
you, Mr. Chairman.
Maybe on page 1.
On page 1, the committee, the recommendations are as stated. We couldn't act on the Meadow Valley the way the item was agendized at our committee meeting. So I told Paul to just bring it to the commission at this time.
Okay. So I think what we'll do, let's take comment on both, and then maybe we'll take it in 2 separate motions. So give us your the committee recommendation on page 2 as well.
The committee recommendation was to leave it as is at this time.
And what was the rationale?
It was, maybe I'd have Commissioner Bliss, it was he brought up several good points on that, on the sealed bid process and why we maybe just leave it alone.
I guess some of the conversations that we had that we were a little bit nervous with the sealed bid process. It's not that we were all that much against it, is that maybe we ought to look at it a little bit in a little more detail in the future if we wanted to go that way. I was personally nervous that depending on the makeup of a committee or a commission in the future, that a sealed bid process could be chosen over actually putting these tags to an NGO or another event for auction. And my concern, I just wanted to make sure we were okay, and we discussed that, and I think we're okay in some of the language that Maureen explained. And as we got into it, it says that we can give up to 5 wild turkey tags. It doesn't say we have to give 5 wild turkey tags. And it just seemed like, although there was a good comment made that, hey, the money that's generated goes to the heritage account and we can, match those funds. So every dollar that we can get in there is a benefit. But it seemed like we were going to have to do an awful lot and take some chances to try to make sure we could issue 1 or 2 tags. There's also some discussion that, maybe we should look at it, and as far as setting these tags out, approving them a year in advance, which would allow some of these earlier events to actually auction off the next year's tag. So instead of changing the language now, we wanted to kind of have some time to look over these other options before we went forward with it. And with the information from Mr. Lytle and the Meadow Valley Wildlife organization willing to take this last tag, we thought that we'd be good for this year.
And then also, Mr. Chairman, there was some discussion on, by doing the sealed bid process, how it could potentially devalue the tag.
Okay.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Commissioner Bliss, but I didn't want to miss.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I noticed. I was going to ask you if you could remember that far back. But. Further discussion by the commission? Okay, hearing none. Maureen, anything else we needed to cover?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. So we'll open it up. We're on agenda item 22. This is Amendment 1, Heritage Tag Organization Vendor Selections and Special Regulations. County Advisory Board input.
Sean Shea, Washoe County. We approved it it was a 3-1 vote, and I was the one dissenting, which I will come back in public comment to kind of go over why I had an idea. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional cab inputs? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas on item 22.
No public comments in Las Vegas. Thank you, Chairman.
And Reno?
No public comment in Reno.
Okay. And Elko? I know we have one.
Sean Shea, this is just for myself. I started looking at this, and when I saw no recommendation, so I figured I'll try to make a recommendation for. I started really looking at this, and if you look at in the Upland Game bird stamp projects, Carson Valley Chukar Club has given so much money to this organization. And they, back in November, they went and they called for this application stuff. They never received it. And that's why in the Heritage thing, we brought up where you can get it online now. Hopefully that'll go through. So it'll, So I was hoping maybe that there was a way that I'm going to throw a recommendation that we give that extra tag out to Carson Valley Chukar Club. I mean, they get 600 to 700 people show up at this dinner. And I think once you double a tag, and nothing against Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited, but I've seen when there's 2 turkey tags at a show, like a dinner, it doesn't seem like the people don't bid it up because they know there's two of them there. And I think if you got one tag at each dinner, it's one tag. Somebody's going to spend some money if they start bidding because it's just one tag. So I just threw that out since there was no recommendation, and if we could do that, or I mean, they can get their paperwork or whatever. It was just a miscommunication where they didn't get their packet. And this next year, if it goes online, I guarantee they're gonna have a packet. And like I said, for 2017, the proposed projects, they're giving $18,500 from their dinners, and that's what they've been doing, like 12,000 plus every year. And I think they deserve one. So I thought I'd just throw that out.
Okay. Additional public input. Come on up, Rex.
Rex Flowers, for the record. I was at the Heritage Committee meeting the other night, and I'll bring it up again about we can resolve some of the issues of getting all the tags out if we would allow for a fall turkey hunt. And I did talk to Sean Espinosa some today, and historically we have had those hunts in the past. Populations were down, that's why they've eliminated them. But with a total of 5 turkey tags available, there would be a way to work that so that we could have a fall hunt or a spring hunt. The NGO would need to clarify which one it's for, or it'd be set by however they do their fundraiser. But I would like to see us keep that option open rather than a sealed bid. Thank you.
Additional public input? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission, and I would just say that having attended both the Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited and Carson Valley Chukar Club dinners, I think they would both do an excellent job representing that tag. I think Meadow Valley actually would do fine even with 2, based on what I saw. I would love to see Carson Valley with 1. I think they're usually the first Saturday in March. Just makes me a little nervous that they weren't able to get the paperwork in. And I know maybe that wasn't of any fault of their own, but I guess they both fleeced me out of money last year, so maybe I'll be a little biased against both of them. But I think either one would do a great job. I'm just a little concerned about logistics on Carson Valley. So I do appreciate all they've done with the upland money. Mr. Bliss?
Yeah, Chairman Drew, I agree with you and Sean's idea on that. I just don't think it's possible that we could step out and give Carson Valley Chukars 1 this year, and for the simple reason that Fallon MBU come in late and requested to be in the game for a California sheep tag, and I kind of held strong and said, a deadline's a deadline, and then there were some other organizations that Deputy Director Rob said had called in, and he had said and told them that they weren't eligible to apply because they'd missed a deadline. So hopefully we can get these kinks worked out and this online deal going for this upcoming year, and I think it'll be helpful. So
My hunch is that probably the buyers on these are going to find those venues anyway, I would think. So, any further discussion? Reading anything? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion on at least the page 1 portion of CR 1603.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve CR 1603 2017 Wildlife Heritage Tags with the addition of the remaining turkey tag be allotted to Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited.
second that.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Valentine and a second by Commissioner Bliss to approve CR 1603 2017 Wildlife Heritage Tags Amendment 1 for the vendors listed in our support material, with one change, and that would be to give a second wild turkey tag to Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited. So 2 would go to Wynn, 1 would go to Pershing County, and 2 would go to Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited. And we'll deal with page 2 in a separate motion. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. And we'll go to page 2. The committee recommendation, as you heard, was no change at this point. Is there any further discussion on that? Seeing none, I would call for a motion on page 2 as well.
the recommendation from the committee is to not adopt the changes that we see in the red.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, do we even need a motion on it? It just stays the same if we don't take action.
I'm going to delegate up to Dag Newton on that one.
Do we need a motion for no action?
It's clear if you have a motion, even if it's for no action. Whether you need one or not is up to interpretation.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we do not accept the changes as proposed by the department relevant to CR 1603 sealed bids number 3 on page 2.
Second.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Commissioner McNish and a second by Commissioner Wallace to keep that portion of CR 1603, page 2 in our regulations, special regulations for each tag, as is. So essentially there would be no change. All the blue language would go away, all the red strikeout would come out, and essentially the motion is for no action as recommended by the committee. Any question or discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Maureen. And that will close item 22. And before we get into item 23, I think we're probably due for a break. Thank you. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners in Elko with audio or video feeds to Reno and Las Vegas. Before the break, we took a motion to table items or call items 23 and 24 at the call of the chair, which leaves us at item 25, which we will open at this time. Commission General Regulation 460, definition of spike elk, LCB file number R013-16. Game Division Administrator Brian Wakeling for possible action. The Commission will consider adopting amendments to NAC 502-104 and 502-1045 to define spike elk in a manner that limits inadvertent errors in the field. The intent is to consider and possibly broaden the definition of spike in a manner that is consistent with management objective of defining a spike while reducing likelihood of errors in harvest identification. Workshop was held in Yerington on March 25th, and further discussion on the proposed amendment occurred in Reno on May 14th. The Commission amended the version of the language for consideration at the June meeting that defines spike as any antlered elk having no more than 2 points above the top of the ear on either antler. Mr. Wakeling, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. You have certainly adequately and accurately represented the new definition. That's in 502-104. It is also reflected in 502-1045. Those are the only two changes to that. One of the benefits, of course, to this is that it identifies points rather than branching, and points are defined in NAC 502-006. So unless you have any further questions, that pretty much wraps up my presentation.
Questions for Mr. Wakeling? So just to be clear, what we have in front of us, what we're considering for adoption today, is that spike elk means any antlered elk having no more than 2 points above the top of the ears on either antler.
That is correct.
Okay, questions? County Advisory Board inputs?
Sean Shea, Washoe County. I just wanted to say we approved it. We're tired of looking at this. Thank you.
You're tired of looking at it.
He's entitled. Paul Dixon Clark. Just wanted to say that although we didn't have time to officially address it on this agenda item because we ran out of time, we did talk about it the last time, and we had supported the Darren Elmore version of this, and what you guys have here is very close to that. So I would say Clark County is in support of what you have. Thank you.
Additional cab input? Commissioner Wallace, just I know we had some input from Pershing that they wanted read in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Pershing said they do not support. They think a spike should be a true spike with no branching.
Okay. Anyone else? County Advisory Boards? Public input from Las Vegas on item 25?
No public comments in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Reno on item 25?
No comment in Reno, Mr. Chairman.
Public comment in Elko on item 25? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Chairman, I move to approve Commission General Regulation 460, definition of spike elk, LCD file number R013-16, as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston and a second by Commissioner Young to approve Commission General Regulation 460, definition of spike elk, LCB file number R013-16 as presented. And just so we're all clear, spike elk means any antlered elk having no more than 2 points above the top of the ears on either antler. Any question or discussion on the motion? I know this has been cumbersome. I appreciate everyone's patience and stick-to-itiveness. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wakeling, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll close item 25 and move to item 26, Commission General Regulation 461, Industrial Artificial Pond Permits, LCB file number R014-16, Habitat Division Administrator Alan Janae for possible action. The Commission will consider adopting regulations changes related to Chapter 502 of the Nevada Administrative Code. It revises provisions relating to artificial industrial ponds, adds a provision on the purpose of permits, adds definition for permanent closure and stabilization, adds new provisions and revisions or revises existing provisions relating to application, compliance, modification, renewal, and transfer of permits, and modifies provisions relating to assessment fee structure and payment tiers. A workshop was held in Reno on May 13th, where the Commission asked that the following language be added to Section 8, specifications for design of any facility associated with the artificial or artificially created body of water, according to the highest applicable payment tier within any of the following schedules. This language was added to provide clarity that only the maximum amount found in any one of the applicable tiers be assessed and that the calculation will not be additive. Mr. Janae, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commission. Thank you. For the record, Alan Janae, Habitat Division Chief. As you mentioned, this is the second workshop of this regulation in addition to the three stakeholder workshops that we held across the state. This regulation was set to bring the assessment fee schedule to parity across industry so that it just wasn't the mining industry paying mining or an assessment fee on industrial artificial ponds. So what we did is we created three different fee schedules based on the tonnage of ore, the cumulative acres of ponds, and the cumulative acres of water bodies, and then associated 5 payment tiers with each of those fee schedules that would allow us to basically assess fees, again, only with one applicable fee schedule to any particular facility. So as you read at the hearing in May on the 13th, at the recommendation of the Commission, we made some modifications to the language in Section 8 and added, I think it was 6 particular words to change that section so that that would be clear that it would only be relative to one fee schedule, and that verbiage went to specifications for the design of any facility associated with the artificial or artificially created body of water according to the highest applicable payment tier of any of the following schedules. And that was the only modification that we had coming out of that last hearing in May. Unless you have any other wishes, that's a summary of.
And that change was actually on page 7, and it is handwritten in on our support material. I know at that time Nevada Mining Association was there. They seem to be amenable to that change. I don't see them here today, but I just wanted to verify that there was no concern raised by industry after our workshop.
No, after workshop we did have a conversation with Alan Biaggi of Nevada Mining Association, and they were good with the language change.
Okay. Appreciate all the hard work that went into that. Questions for Mr. Janae or discussion by the Commission? Seeing none, County Advisory Board input on item number 26. Okay, seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas on item 26.
No public comments in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And public comment in Reno on item 26.
No comment in Reno.
Okay, anything in Elko? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Is there any further discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'd move to approve Commission General Regulation 461 Industrial Artificial Pond Permits, LCD file number R014-16.
Second.
I've got a motion by Commissioner Johnston, a second by Commissioner Wallace to approve Commission General Regulation 461 Industrial Artificial Pond Permits, LCB file number R014-16 as presented today, which would include the one language change presented on page 7. Is there any further discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Unanimous. With that, Mr. Janae, thank you. We'll close item 26 and move to item 27, Commission General Regulation 462, issuing and verifying hull numbers of vessels, LCB file number R015-16, Management Analyst 3, Maureen Hollinger, for possible action. The Commission will consider the adoption of regulation changes to address federal regulatory changes the U.S. Coast Guard has requested states to implement pertaining to hull numbers for vessels and the verification and issuance of these numbers, the processing of certificate of number applications for vessels to include language definitions, standardization of terminology regarding vessels, and personal identification information of the owners. In order to receive federal matching funds associated with the Ingalls-Johnson Act, all states report vessel information annually to U.S. Coast Guard in an effort to modernize and standardize their vessel database information, which the Coast Guard collects from all the states. The USCG amended federal law. This federal change standardizes terminology across all states and provides direction regarding the method that states assign to verify hull numbers. Ultimately, these federal changes are expected to improve state reporting. As a result, the Department must amend state regulations to implement these standardization efforts in order to meet U.S. Coast Guard reporting requirements. These changes must be implemented by January 1st, 2017. Workshop was held in Reno on March 13th. The Department provided several cleanup language changes which were accepted by the Commission. Ms. Hollinger, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission. The Department presented the workshop language for LCB file R15-16, Commission General Regulation 462, during the May Commission meeting, as you stipulated. During the workshop of the language, the Department identified additional corrections and deletions, housekeeping edits to the language. These edits are handwritten on the pages 8, 9, and 10, 12, 13, 16, 20, 22, 24, and 26 in the copy that is presented for action today. At the end of the workshop, there were no additional changes. The Commission did have one question in regards to those changes back to the Department, and that was to see if the Coast Guard was on board with those edits, and Captain Pfiffner out of our Las Vegas office did reach out to his contact, and they verified they had no issues with those additional changes.
Okay. So nothing in addition to what's in the support material?
Nothing in addition to what's in the support material.
Appreciate that. Questions? Seeing none, I'll open it up. County Advisory Board inputs on item 27. Public comment on item 27 in Las Vegas.
No. No comments in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Appreciate the outreach to the Coast Guard. I see a uniformed gentleman down there. And comments in Reno on item 27.
No comment in Reno.
Okay. Anything in Elko? Public comment, item 27. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the Commission. Is there any further discussion or question? Not, I'd entertain a motion.
Chairman, I'll move to approve Commission General Regulation 462, issuing and verifying hull numbers of vessels, LCB file number R015-16, as presented today with the final edits.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Johnston, a second by Commissioner Wallace to approve Commission General Regulation 462, issuing and verifying hull numbers of vessels, LCB file number R015-16, as presented today, which includes all the editorial changes presented by Maureen at our last workshop and presented in the support material today. Any further discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll close item 27. And I think what we'll do, Tyler, are you in the room?
Yes.
I think what we'll do is, we're at 4 o'clock, so we will open item 24 and see how far we get. Commission General Regulation 459, Unmanned Aerial Vehicles, Drones, LCD file number R145-15. Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for possible action. The Commission will consider amending Chapters 501 and 503 of the Nevada Administrative Code. The proposed regulation amendment contains several changes. The first change would make the prohibition of using aerial devices for the purpose of hunting and scouting from July 1st to the last day of February each calendar year, rather than the current prohibition of 48 hours prior and during to any open season. The second change is to clarify existing language that prohibits the use of unmanned aerial vehicles for the purpose of hunting, locating, or observing big game mammals. The change would extend aerial scouting prohibitions and clarify the existing regulations by explicitly listing unmanned aerial vehicles. The third change is to clarify real-time satellite images. The proposed amendment would also add game birds and fur-bearing mammals to the aerial scouting and hunting prohibition. 2 workshops have been held on this regulation change, one on January 29th and one on March 25th. The Commission directed the Department to add game birds and fur-bearing mammals to the season closure on aerial scouting and hunting. Change the closure dates to say July 1 to the last day of February each calendar year, and to add and define the term real-time, clarifying satellite imagery. Mr. Turnipseed, before I turn it over, I think we also had some discussion at our last workshop about the potential of adding some language on a private property exemption, and I don't think the rewrite incorporated that, but I think there was some feedback that we got from LCB, so maybe you could open with that.
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman Drew and members of the Commission. Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for the record. You did a great job of explaining the ins and outs of the regulation. It's been before this board twice in workshop format. At the last workshop, we had quite a lengthy discussion, especially with Commissioner Morai, about adding in some private land provisions. We kind of plugged those in there, sent it to LCB, and LCB came back saying that those did not need to be in there because of the clause in the front that specifies for the purpose of hunting. Line 1 in NAC 503-148 says, "A person shall not, for the purpose of hunting, locate or observe or assist a person in locating or observing any big game mammal." That private land radius that we talked about as far as surveying a person's property for private land, animal usage, or an elk inventory on private land or something. Any of those scenarios I ran by the LCB drafter, he didn't think needed to be in there because of this for the purpose of hunting clause. As you said, it does a couple things. The first goal was to, or one of the first goals was to add in the term unmanned aerial vehicle to explicitly call that out. The thought was that they were probably already covered under any other form of aircraft, but to eliminate any confusion, we added in the unmanned aerial vehicle part. The second part that was suggested by the Commission was to take out the part about 48 hours before a big game hunting season opens in a unit, because there's been some confusion in the past in which some tag holders got themselves into trouble by thinking it was 48 hours prior to their hunt rather than 48 hours prior to any big game season in the unit. For that change, the Commission directed the Department to change it to July 1 through the last day of February in each calendar year. And then a couple other smaller revisions, adding in the term real-time in front of satellite images. I think the goal there, as we discussed, was to differentiate between a person who scouts on Google Earth to look at roads or habitat types or something versus technology that probably exists right now in the military and may be available to the public down the road, where you could actually spot big game animals in a satellite view. So that's the impetus behind the real-time part. And then the Commission's direction also was to specify also, in addition to big game mammal, game bird or fur-bearing mammal. So kind of a mouthful there, but I think probably everybody remembers our discussions at the workshops.
Questions for Chief Turnipseed? Any discussion on the proposed language before us? I know this has gone through a rewrite, so things tend to change, but nothing jumped out at me. Tyler, everything that you saw you were comfortable with?
Yeah, I think it's pretty squared away. Like I said, with the exception of Commissioner Morai's thoughts on private land, but LCB was of the opinion that we didn't need to add that.
Okay. All right. County Advisory Board input on item 24, unmanned aerial vehicles, flying regulations. Mr. Rittenhouse, come on up.
Bob Rittenhouse, Douglas Cab. We were brought up the conversation of incidental information before information about animals being forwarded or sold by ranchers or private individuals when they were legitimately observing cattle or agricultural situations. And they would pass that information on to somebody. Is that, how do we prevent that?
Bring that back. Additional cab input. Seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment. This is item 24, CGR 459 in relation to unmanned aerial vehicles or drones. So let's open it up to public comment in Las Vegas.
No comment in Las Vegas, Chairman. Thank you.
And Reno.
No comment in Reno, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything in Elko? Come on up.
Robert Pagoda, Chairman Drew, and Commissioners. I'm here on behalf of Shannon Scott, a backcountry hunters and anglers of backcountry hunters and anglers. Basically, we support the regulation as currently written. Thanks.
Thank you. Next comment.
For the record, Henry Krinka, Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We support this, but I know you've already had a couple workshops and kind of late for looking into it, but Alaska, which most of their hunting transportation is done by aircraft. Up there, the fixed wing is the only way you can go in. There are no allowances for helicopters, drones, or anything of that. And with the way things are, the helicopter people and that are circumventing the law. You know, as last year they started doing that. I think maybe it would be a good idea to look into Alaska's law and see if maybe Nevada would want to go that way to get ahead of the curve here on this. But otherwise, we support this. Thank you.
Additional public input. I think Elko did identify some issues with fixed wings on the discussion they had at their meeting. Was there anything you guys wanted to provide in addition to what was on the action report?
No, the action report stated that we were in support of the regulation.
Okay.
Even though those issues were brought up.
Okay.
About flying, looking for a place to park a trailer.
Okay. I appreciate the input. So just to clarify for those that weren't near a microphone, Elko CAB is in support. They just wanted to represent those concerns that had been raised. Okay. Great. Any other comment? Last call. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve Commission General Regulation 459 as presented by the...
I'll second it.
I've got a motion by Commissioner McNinch and a second by Commissioner Young to approve Commission Regulation 459, Unmanned Aerial Vehicles, Drones, LCB file number R145-15, as presented in the support material by the department today. Is there any question or further discussion on that motion?
I'm just going to make a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. I know there's been a lot of discussion about private property and using it for other purposes. I couldn't agree with what was the feedback from LCB, that under this statute and this regulation is written, it would be the state's burden to prove as an element of the crime that was used for the purpose of hunting. And therefore, given that burden, it's not going to, I think, tend to prohibit or interfere with people using drones for agricultural purposes or private property surveys or things of that nature.
Okay. Further discussion, Commissioner Morai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be quick here. I'm not going to be supporting the motion. Because I think this thing is actually, the changes maybe are more directed at airplanes. And that kind of is the drones kind of got thrown into it, but there are other changes to the regulation that we didn't just add drones here. We changed some other stuff. And so I don't agree with some of the stuff in here, but I'll go quietly and rest in peace on it.
Said as only you can say it. I did threaten to get you a drone for retirement, and I really chickened out on that. So for that I apologize.
Pete, can I make one exception and disagree with you for once?
It took all this time, but we finally got there. Okay, further discussion or question on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1 with Commissioner Morai the dissenting vote. We'll close item 24.